In this video we're going to create the potted plant using the revolve tool and a curve, and then we're going to be using a new tool called the polygon extrude tool. I'm starting off in my front view so I can revolve the pot using a CV curve. Holding down the space bar, I'll go to create curve tools, CV curve tool, attribute. And I've changed it to one linear so I get these sharp edges that we see on the pot. I'll start against the y-axis and draw the shape I want to revolve the pot. The thickness of the pot doesn't have to go much past the top because we'll have a dirt surface across the pot when it's done. Once I've set the vertexes, I'll hit return. I'll hold down my space bar and I'll go to surfaces in the middle of the hotbox to revolve and to the attributes. I'll choose edit reset settings, making sure it's on Y, and I'll hit apply. Now I have the pot shape I want, but if I wanted to edit this further, I could go to the CV curve. If I went to control vertex, I could now edit this any way I chose. I'll go back to my object mode. Now for any reason, if you had revolved your path away from the y-axis, you might find a shape that you didn't have in mind. It could be inside out, it could be much too big. You can simply move the whole path if you want, or you could right click and go to your control vertexes and you could edit it that way as well. Once I have the pot shape I want, I'll go to my object mode and choose delete by type history. Now I'll get rid of the path and I'm going to go to my top view. Now in my top view I'm going to use a NURB circle and planar mapping from the surface menu to create a geometry surface to be serving as our dirt. Holding down the space bar, I'll go to create NURBS primitives circle. I'll click and drag, and I'm going to hit 5 on the keyboard while I'm in the top view so that when I fill this in I'll see the geometry and I'll be sure that I have what I wanted. With the circle selected, I'll hold down the space bar and I'm going to go to surfaces, planar, and I'm going to go to the attributes. In your attributes, if you want to reset your settings, you'll see that the output geometry is a NURB. To the right of that, you'll see there's an option called polygons, and that's what we're going to use. I'll click on polygons, and I'm going to choose quads and count. The default count is usually 200, and that'll be fine for our purposes. Once I hit apply, it fills in my geometry and you can see the divisions and the faces that it generated. I'm now going to my perspective view because we're going to use the soft select to make this look more like a raised mound of dirt. In my perspective view, I'll hit F on the keyboard. I'll center the pivot. And I'll right click on my polygon surface and choose vertex. Selecting one vertex in the middle, I'm going to double click on the move tool and I'm going to open up soft select. With polygon soft select, we can select the one vertex, and based on the fall off radius we can affect a number of faces, diminishing as it goes out further from the original selection. So I'm going to set the soft select to maybe 4, and you'll see that the selection colors radiating from that selected vertex go from yellow to red and then to black. Black with the littlest influence, red with some influence, and the most influence would be directly around the vertex and it would be in kind of a yellow. So if I pull that up now, I get something like this. Now I can go around the surface of this whole disk, selecting intermittently and just pulling up on it to get a little bit of an effect here, just so it doesn't look so flat. If I return to my top view, I can now put the dirt where I'd like it to be in the context of the pot. And we have something like this. Now I'm ready to make the branch plant part that comes out of the dirt. I'll start my top view, delete by type history, delete the curve, And in my top view, I'll hold down my spacebar, go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and a cube. I'll drag a footprint for the thickness of that plant branch. And then in my perspective view, I'll give it some height. Now it gets pretty subjective on the height and shape of this. And in order to make something kind of organic, as we see here, when I hit 3 on the keyboard, you can see that with a smooth proxy or the Arnold render settings, this is what we'd end up with. We're going to use a tool called the Polygon Extrude tool. Now any kind of plant starts out thicker at the base and narrows as it grows out and increases branches and twigs. I'll select my geometry, right click and choose face, selecting the top face and taking the soft select off by hitting B. You'll know you're in soft select because you'll see those yellow lines now assigned to the faces of my polygon. With B off, I'll taper it. And I'm going to add a new tool to my toolbar. Holding down the Command and the Shift, I'll go to Edit Mesh, and I'll choose Extrude. The Extrude tool appears to be a flat white plane with a tall orange cube rectangle on it. When I click on that, you'll see that the vertices now have all the features of transform that we're accustomed to: scale, movement, and rotation. If I click and drag on the vertex that's pointing up, in this instance my Z, I can drag that new face up. I can move it, and with the scale tool I can taper it. With the rotation tool I could click and I could tip it in a different direction. And I might do that because I want to add another polygon face and have the branch go in a different direction. So once again, I'll click on the tool on my shelf and I'll drag that one up. Select one of the scale cubes, and in the very center with the lighter blue one, I'll drag that to the left and taper that one as well. I'm going to go to my object mode. Now I want to add some branches to this. To do that, we're going to use a tool that we've already used before called the Edge Loop tool. And the Edge Loop tool looks like a window pane with an orange dotted line through it. If that's not on your shelf, you can hold down Command Shift and go to Mesh Tools and insert Edge Loop. Now with my Edge Loop tool, I'm going to add a new edge down below the first edge here where the polygon segments, because I'm going to use one of these faces and extrude another branch from this plant. I'll hit W once I've put the path in, right click and choose face, select the face, and then click on the Extrude Poly tool. And again, there are the 3 transform functions: scale, rotate, and move. I'll move it out, and I'll taper it, and I'll rotate it up a little bit. Now I can click on the tool to add a new polygon face, or in Maya, by hitting G on the keyboard, it'll allow you to repeat the previous function. So there's no need for the tool menu or the tool if you do these things consecutively. I'll add another branch up near the top. I'll start again with the edge loop and put an edge in above the one that exists there already. Hitting W on the keyboard, I'll right click and choose face, and I'll select the face and click on my Extrude Poly tool, and I'll start to pull that out and move it and shape it the way I want. I'll add another piece to that by hitting G on the keyboard or clicking on the Polygon Extrude tool again. And I'll taper that. I'll go back to my object mode, delete by type history. If I hit 3 on the keyboard, I'll get my proxy smooth. Now, the branches look more like a deer antler here. I'd like the branches to maintain their integrity where they come from the main source a little bit more. Hitting 1 on the keyboard, I'll take my Edge Loop tool again, and I'll introduce an edge here now at the base of the new branch. The closer the new edge is, the more it will maintain the integrity here and the shape. So if I was to hit 3 on the keyboard, you can see now that that broad edit has disappeared. I'll hit 1 on the keyboard and I'll hit W, and just to kind of demonstrate this a little bit more clearly, if I move that away from that original edge and hit 3, you'll see now that there's much more geometry sweeping across this series of faces. I'll hit 1 on the keyboard and I'll move it back down to the base again. I'll hit 3 on the keyboard, and now the only thing I need to deal with is the bottom where it's too round. Hitting 1 on the keyboard, I'll get the edge loop tool and I'll put an edge down close to the base. Now if I were to hit 3, I've got something a little closer to what I want. I'll hit 1 on the keyboard, right click and go back to my object mode. And now I'm going to put this into a pot using my orthographic views. And moving it up perhaps. And now we have our potted plant. Now that I have my plant, I'm going to color it. I'll start with the branch, right-clicking and choosing Assigning New Material. I'll select Arnold, AI Standard Surface. I'll name it in my attributes on the right. And then I'm going to take the specular weight off, making it 0. That'll take the sheen off of our geometry. When we render it, we don't want trees and other elements to have a shine on them. Now I'll do the dirt the same way, selecting it. I'll right-click, Assign New Material, Arnold, AI Standard, naming the node, changing the color and the value. And once again, I'm going to take the specular weight off. Now all I need to do is the pot. Again, selecting it, right-clicking in my viewport, Assign New Material, Arnold, AI Standard. Naming it. I'll assign it a color. And I'll take the specular weight off for this as well. Now we have our pot colored, and all we need to do is group it and put it into position. I'll marquee select or shift select the 3 elements, hitting Command G. I'll center the pivot, delete by type history, and in my channel box I'll name the group Potted Plant. If I need to separate terms, I would use an underscore. Now I want to be able to scale this from the floor up. So I'm going to go to my orthographic view, front or side. Holding down D on the keyboard, I'll move the pivot to the base of the plant. Return to my perspective view. I'm now ready to put it into my interior. With my walls and floor and interior turned on, I'll hit R on the keyboard and I'll scale the potted plant down to the scale I might want and then put it into position. I'll put it over here next to my outlet.